All right, so then I have it set up with a splash page, and then that splash page is authenticated just with a CloudTrax because it's just going to have a free access button. You can also set that up with other forms of authentication going back to your Radius server, or you can have your own HTTP authentication connection. Next down here is the client force timeout. So that is the time it takes for that client to see the splash page again. And so since this business has some housing above it, I wanted to keep the splash page timeout relatively low so that the people that are above there aren't going to want to connect and use this for long periods of time. So I have it set to 180 minutes, and then every 180 minutes, the splash page will appear on your device again, so that they will have to click through that again. I'm not using vouchers on this network, but if I were, then I would say that I want to require vouchers. And then this fail-safe mode option here is that if you are using vouchers or some other kind of authentication, if that authentication were to fail, then the access point would automatically allow them access to the network for an hour until they have to re-authenticate. So down here, the display name, there's a variable in the splash page that I'll show you a bit later that starts with a $sign and says gateway name. If you leave this field empty, then it will use the SSID name. So this SSID that you put up here, and yes, you can use emojis for SSIDs. And if you wanted to use a different thing for that, you can put that display name here, or you can just edit out that variable and use something else. And then the redirect URL, this is the URL that devices would be sent to after they click continue on the splash page. Now, like an Android device, as soon as it connects and detects that it has an internet connection, it'll just take away that splash page screen. But like Apple devices, they'll bring you over to that redirect URL. And if you have tracking on that on your web server, on your website, what you can do is click this include user data in redirect URL, and then it will append at the end of this URL a couple of parameters. So it will append the MAC address of the access point, the MAC address of the client, and then the client URL that the client used to trigger that splash page. And then so you can take that and use that for statistics if you like. The whitelist section here, these are MAC addresses that you can put in to automatically authenticate through the splash page. So if you have a device that doesn't have a web browser, like a Roku or a game console, you can just enter the MAC address of that device into here, and then they'll be automatically authenticated through the splash page so that they will never have to see that page. And then the walled garden down here is a list of sites that you can go to before the splash page is authenticated. All right, so when you edit the splash page, I've already put this together. We have lots of different templates that you could use for lots of different situations. So if we wanted to say brew, it's ready to go for a bar. You can take any of these and just delete. It's a nice WYSIWYG editor. You can edit and put in your own pictures as you like, but make sure when you're using pictures that because these splash pages, the CloudTrax hosted splash pages, they're actually being served from the access points themselves, and being just access points, they have limited amounts of memory, and so those splash pages and images are stored locally on the access points. And that way, you can serve those splash pages really quickly. And so because of that, the max file size of any image that you could put on the splash page is 500 kilobytes, and the total for all images on your splash page is 1 megabyte. All right, so this is that variable that I was talking about before, a gateway name. It'll put in the SSID title right there if you want, or you can just edit that out. Now, if you want to get down and dirty with the code, you can go up to this this button here and see the HTML, and from here you can edit the HTML to whatever you like. Just make sure that you take a look at the buttons. So these buttons that are here, either the free access button or the login buttons, they pass data back to CloudTrax for the authentication. So take a look at the code for those and make sure that you're using those buttons properly if you're editing the HTML yourself. So you have a couple different options here for getting through the splash page. There's free access, and that free access button will get you through, and their bandwidth limitations would be limited to what you've set up here. So if you see in the background up here, it would be 8 megabits per client down and 2.5 up for each client that connects through here. If you wanted to give a different level of access for clients on the same SSID, you can issue them vouchers. And I'll go through vouchers a little bit more in a few minutes. But with those voucher codes, they would just enter them with the login here, and then they would be given the speed of access that you specify in that voucher. And then radius access, that is if you want to connect back to your own radius server, you can specify username and passwords to connect to the network. And then you can also set up PayPal, and I'll go through that in just a little bit. If you don't want to use any of these options, you can just highlight them and press delete, and they'll go away. All right, so close that one. And then another cool feature about, so if you're using these in a public area, you can schedule Wi-Fi. So with scheduling Wi-Fi, you can just specify during the time that business is open. So for this one, since it overlaps after midnight, I've said that it's going to be unavailable between 2:30 a.m. and noon. And if you want to do it just during the day, you can say that it's available between like 8 and 5.